Hi, so today I'm going to be summarizing the first 4 chapters of Larceny in the Heart by Rousas J. Rushdoony, The Economics of Satan and the Inflationary State. The first chapter is chapter 1, The Meaning of Inflation. So Rousas Rushdoony starts off by just defining inflation. Its the main point of his book is talking about inflation and the issues that it can cause. So he starts off by saying that inflation is caused by the increase of the supply of money and credit by the central civil or statist agencies. So just this idea that the state has gone away from the money linked to gold, which is what the standard used to be, and now they can just print money and produce more money. And through this process, it essentially lowers the value of that cash, and then therefore essentially stealing from people who own money because it steals the value of their money. And he says that this is an issue, a big issue, and essentially power is the goal of this. So through this process, although it may not seem like it on the surface, the state is actually gaining more power because they're the ones printing the money, they're the ones supplying it, and so they're essentially placing themselves on the throne and gaining power through this. And he goes on to he continues by saying that this issue of inflation actually has a religious root. It's the state's attempt to play God by saying, hey, look, we can create something out of nothing. By printing this money, we're essentially creating something out of nothing. And then his conclusion for that first chapter is that inflation is larceny. It's stealing. It's not something, although it is legal, obviously, this printing of money, it's an issue. It's stealing from people. It's larceny. Chapter 2, he goes and talks about regulations. So he starts off by naming a few myths, and the first one he names, or the second one I think actually, is the non-state regulated life is lawless. And this is a lie that a lot of us believe, but it's not true. The truth he goes into is that God provides the ultimate law, and it's the only law that can provide true freedom. So we think that outside of the government, the government is the thing that keeps us safe. The government is, and there's some truth to that, but it creates this lie in our heads that outside the government, there's no law, everything is reckless, and it becomes chaos, which is not true. And actually, through Christ, there can be true freedom, actually, and he's the only law that can provide that. 2 Corinthians 3 verse 17 says, where the Spirit of the Lord is, there is freedom. And he mentions that verse in the chapter. Chapter 3, he talks about rationing. And he talks about work at the beginning. He starts off with work. And he says that, he looks back at Genesis, actually, before the fall. And he comes to the conclusion that, look, work existed before the fall. And therefore, it's inherently good. And because of this, freedom in God's world means mental and physical work. That's one of my favorite quotes. I underlined it in here. So the truth is, work is good. And therefore, God has a system in place that good work is rewarded. And this system essentially shows itself in the pricing that we have today. So good work will increase wages, and therefore good work will be rewarded through pricing. If you work hard, you're able to buy something more expensive. This is why pricing is actually a good form of rationing that naturally occurs. It's what happens in our system. But unfortunately, the government interferes with this issue of pricing too. They put price caps on things. They lower prices artificially. And then because of this, they de-incentivize working. Essentially take something that is good, inherently good from God, and de-incentivize it by saying, hey, look, we're going to make this affordable even if you don't work. And therefore, it's taking that value of work and saying, hey, it's not as valuable because now you can get the things that you need for a lower price, and you may not even have to work for it, which is, not a good thing, obviously. And then finally, in chapter 4, he talks about the economics of Satan. He starts off by talking about Matthew chapter 4, and verses 3 through 4, where Satan confronts Jesus and tempts him, actually. And in his explanation, he goes through the verbiage and exactly what Satan's getting at as he's tempting Christ. And what he comes to the conclusion of is just this idea that Satan lies by making us doubt God's plan. He still does this today. It's his ongoing strategy is that he makes us doubt God's plan, and therefore makes us think that we have to try to fix it, and makes us try to step into this place of playing God ourselves because we don't trust God's plan. It's not good enough for us. He sees this in Satan's offer to have Jesus turn bread into stone, or a stone into bread, because at that time there are a lot of starving people, and he's basically saying that issue, God's not taking care of it, so you should now. And so he offers this temporary solution, which won't work in the long term. And then, out of that idea that Satan has come up with, we get the idea of liberation theology, which is man-centered, and it's of Satan. It's this idea that man can be our own God. We can create solutions. We can create our own freedom. But the truth is that we cannot trust ourselves. We can only trust, only trusting in God's sovereignty can we be truly free, is the conclusion of that chapter. So there you have it.